It is a very busy and dangerous day in the Middle East. Within the last hour, the Israel Defense Forces have claimed that they succeeded in killing Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, in attacks yesterday and today that targeted Beirut. The IDF struck 6 buildings yesterday, housing scores of families in the Lebanese capital, burying an unknown number of men, women and children in the rubble. Among them, the Israeli army now claims Hassan Nasrallah, the undisputed leader of Hezbollah. Several other senior figures in Hezbollah were also, says Israel, killed. This is a massive development in the Middle East, threatening to suck Iran, which largely controls Hezbollah, into a full-scale regional war. And at the White House, where the Israeli military action was the clearest sign yet that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has absolutely no interest in Joe Biden and Emmanuel Macron's call for a 21-day ceasefire in Lebanon, the soon-to-be former president of the United States sounded last night like a complete irrelevance.
Still gathering information. I can tell you the United States had no knowledge of or participation in the IDF action. We're gathering more information. I'll have more to say when we have more information.
You say you support Israel's decision to defend itself. Do you support what they did today with the strikes in Beirut?
We have to get more detail. I don't know enough to answer that question.
The assault on Beirut began at the very moment Benjamin Netanyahu was taking to the podium at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. He said he had not initially planned to attend the annual event, but decided he needed to push back against what he called the slies and slanders of other world leaders.
I decided to come here to speak for my people, to speak for my country, to speak for the truth. And here's the truth. Israel seeks peace. Israel yearns for peace. Israel has made peace and will make peace again.
But how does Israel's blatant military strike on a sovereign nation and its extrajudicial killing of the Hezbollah leader advance the course of peace? In what way has Israel become more secure over almost a year of killing in Gaza and now Lebanon, sparked by the shameful, deadly terror assault on Israel on October the 7th last year that left more than 1,100 Israelis dead and hundreds of others seized, violated and carted back to Gaza as Hamas's hostages? Is all of this putting Israel's supporters, principal among them the United States and the UK, at greater risk of reprisals and acts of terrorism? How do you want Britain to respond to the news of the killing of Hassan Nasrallah? Is it time for the UK to suspend all weapons shipments to Israel? Or do you want the UK to continue standing by Netanyahu and his war cabinet? Let's start by going straight to Beirut. Karim Shahayeb is a Beirut-based journalist for the Associated Press and joins me from the Lebanese capital now. Karim, thank you very much for being on the programme today. What do you know about these claims by Israel that they have killed Hassan Nasrallah? And has there been any reaction to that from Hezbollah itself or the Lebanese government?
At the moment, things have been incredibly quiet from Hezbollah. Hezbollah issued some statements announcing that they launched more rockets into Israel, but the rumor mill has been going crazy for the past 24 hours, let me put it that way. And the Lebanese government has been very quiet. We know that the Prime Minister, Najib Mikati, returned early from New York. He's going to hold some emergency cabinet sessions. But what we do know is that there is a very large death toll. That's what health officials anticipate, given the size of the damage. But Hezbollah have been incredibly quiet. In other instances of their leadership being assassinated, Israel has successfully targeted and killed other senior leaders. It would take them up to 12 hours or so, I would say, before they announce their killing. But they've been especially quiet about this. It's just a matter of wait and see. But Hezbollah have been incredibly quiet, quieter than usual.
Karim, can you explain to people the significance of Hassan Nasrallah and what his removal from the field, his elimination by Israel, if it is confirmed, means for Hezbollah, Lebanon and the region?
Absolutely. I think, Nasrallah has been the leader of Hezbollah for several decades now, and he oversaw major transformations in the party. He saw the withdrawal of Israel from southern Lebanon. He oversaw Hezbollah's sort of, establishment as a political force as well in the Lebanese government, Hezbollah's involvement in the region, in the war in Syria and Iraq. He's a major figure for the organization, since its existence. And Hezbollah have, the most powerful group in Lebanon at the moment, politically as well. And at a time like this, at a time of war and crisis, Lebanon internally has political crises of its own. Hezbollah are a very sophisticated organization. If Nasrallah is indeed confirmed to have been assassinated, there will be a replacement. They are an institution after all. However, it could be sort of a massive political earthquake for the country. Who replaced him? What's the vision? How does this affect internal matters? So, it's also very unclear if it's going to be a turning point for this ongoing conflict, or whether it's just the beginning of something even worse. So this is a major political figure in the country.
And it is, Karim, a massive political earthquake, not just for Lebanon and for Hezbollah, but it's potentially a massive political earthquake for Iran and also for Israel, because the idea that there will not be reprisals, significant reprisals this time around, I think is likely to be a very challenging one, isn't it?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, Hezbollah is sort of Iran's main proxy in the region. And exactly, as you said, I think, most analysts I've spoken to anticipate a very big response from Hezbollah. They've been taking major blows over the past couple of weeks, but, it is not expected that they will stay quiet. What we do, we don't know exactly how they're going to respond, but what we do know is that they have taken major blows and they end up responding at the end. So it leaves the region with a lot of uncertainty on the security and well-being of a lot of areas, that's for sure.
And Karim, finally, can I ask you, the British government is saying to any British nationals still in Lebanon that they need to get out. But it's pretty difficult to get out right now, isn't it?
It is certainly tricky. The airport is still functional, but lots of flights are getting cancelled. In Beirut, where most, British citizens do live, there are ways to get there. But of course, the uncertainty of the strikes, the constant bombardment, it is very difficult. And it's very unclear when or how this will change in the near future.
OK, Karim, I'm very grateful to you for joining me on what I know must be an extraordinarily busy and complicated day for you. Thank you so much for being on the programme today. That is Karim Shahayeb, a Beirut-based journalist for the Associated Press. Also with me this morning is Alistair Burt, the former UK, Middle East and North Africa government minister. Alistair Burt, thank you so much for being on the programme today, to you as well. First of all, your reaction to this claim by Israel that it has killed Hassan Nasrallah.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Simon. I think we should take this claim as pretty well standard and correct. I don't think Israel would make this claim if it had not happened. There's been no counterclaim made by those who thought that Nasrallah might have survived last night. I think we can take it pretty well straightforwardly that he has been killed.
And what do you think the British government's response should be to this? Because this is a pretty significant ratcheting up by the Israelis of the risk of a wider conflict, isn't it?
Yes, this is a further escalation. I think the British government will have a series of thoughts. Firstly, it recognises Hezbollah as a terrorist organisation that has launched attacks on Israel over a lengthy period of time. And I doubt it will mourn its leader. It will know, of course, that there is increased risk in the area, so there will be renewed efforts in relation to British citizens to encourage them to leave so long as flights are going out. And then there will be the hard work of saying, well, what next? And trying to do everything possible to make sure that in light of this, there will not be further escalation and further confrontation. But this is not in the United Kingdom's hands. It will be in the hands of Hezbollah in the first place, Israel, and of course, Iran.
You wrote in the New Statesman only a month ago, and I know a month is a very long time in Middle East politics, that there were grounds for thinking that time and opportunity now exist to deliver not just a ceasefire or truce, but a comprehensive resolution to the century-old conflict in the Middle East. You were quoting a Palestinian author who had also contributed an article to the New Statesman. How's your thinking changed over the last month and particularly over the last few hours, if at all?
It hasn't changed at all. I'm with those who believe that October the 7th changed everything in the Middle East. There is no going back to October the 6th. And all we have seen over the past year, all we have seen over the past week, all we have seen over the past 24 hours is a continuation of a problem because no one has found the solution and no one has been willing to find the solution. There is no prospect of a resolution of Gaza unless there is a resolution of the West Bank, of East Jerusalem, and all the issues surrounding Israel and its Palestinian neighbor. Time and experience has shown that. There is endless conflict. You can renew the conflict, you can tone it down, you can push your opponent back for a period of time, but unless the issue itself is resolved, then it will go on. And my point was, because the Middle East wants something different, if you look at the reaching out of Saudi Arabia to Iran, of the Abraham Accords trying to bring Israel into the heart of the Middle East politically and economically, this now cannot be done without a resolution of the Palestinian issue, and nothing in the past 24 hours has changed my mind on that.
Alistair Burt, I'm enormously grateful to you for taking time to be with us this morning. Alistair Burt is the former UK Middle East and North Africa government minister. I'm also joined today by Jasmine El-Gamal, a Middle East affairs analyst who was a Middle East policy advisor to the US Department of Defense in the Obama administration. Jasmine El-Gamal, thanks to you for being on the programme as well today. Your reaction to this news that Israel is claiming to have killed Hassan Nasrallah?
Good morning, Simon, and thank you so much for having me on. Well, there are a couple of short-term issues to be discussed, and then, of course, there's one longer-term issue that the previous guest was talking about. Obviously, in the immediate term, if this turns out to be true, which in all likelihood it is since the IDF has confirmed it, the question is what happens now? Is this the end, or is this a prelude to a ground invasion? Now, the Israelis have basically neutralized Hezbollah from a communications perspective, from an intelligence perspective, and now from a leadership and from a symbolic perspective. The question is, are they now going to go in and try to neutralize them from a military perspective? As you know, the organization has tens of thousands of members, of fighters, and a large military arsenal that remains largely untouched. And so the question is, are they now going to go in with a ground invasion and try to get to that? Or are they going to see this as the end of this round and retreat? The other short-term issue, of course, is what's Hezbollah's reaction and what's Iran's reaction? Is Hezbollah going to see this, and Iran, of course, as well, as its patron, as a sign that they should retreat, sort of take the loss for now and start the long process of rebuilding and regrouping? Or are they going to see this as a fight for their very survival and existential threat and go in with more force against Israel? Of course, the longer term issue is something that Alistair, the previous guest, was saying, which is in the long term, does this actually make Israel safer? You'll remember that Hassan Nasrallah's predecessor was also assassinated, Abbas al-Musawi, and that didn't really do anything to the organization. There are people in Lebanon who are arguing that it will sort of incapacitate Hezbollah in the long term, the way, for example, the Maronites in Lebanon never really recovered from the death of their leader, Bashir Gemayel, or the Sunnis with the death of Rafi al-Hariri, the assassinations, both of them. But then there are others, of course, who are saying, no, this has happened to Hezbollah before. It didn't really get to them in the long term. They're too big. They're too sophisticated. They've been around for too long. This is only going to prolong the conflict.
And Jasmine, can I ask you about what's taking place in Washington, D.C.? There were credible reports over the last few hours that President Biden told confidants and allies this week that he did not believe that Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu wanted a halt to hostilities with Hezbollah, and he expressed increasing frustration as the peace plan that he had brokered, that 21-day ceasefire with the French President Emmanuel Macron, was basically rejected by Israel's war cabinet. The Israelis are treating Joe Biden now as a complete irrelevance, aren't they?
Oh, I mean, I would argue that Joe Biden has worked himself into irrelevance. It's not the Israelis who are treating him like that. It's that he's not actually trying seriously to effect any change. I mean, he's been complaining about Benjamin Netanyahu for almost a year now. And all of these leaked stories about how frustrated he is with Netanyahu, how he has angry phone calls with Netanyahu. But in the meantime, the U.S. continues to send arms and funds to Israel and continues to support the war militarily. Their envoy Amos Hochstein, who's been dealing on the Lebanon-Israel issue, has been completely sidelined, ineffective. The Israelis don't really tell him anything before they do what they do, and likewise with Secretary of State Blinken. So the Americans really come out of this looking extremely impotent diplomatically on one end, and then also at the same time continuing to fuel the very conflict that they say they're trying to end. Not really a good stance for the Americans to have taken, unfortunately.
Indeed. Jasmine El-Gamal, thank you so much for joining us today. She's a Middle East affairs analyst and was a Middle East policy advisor to the Pentagon during the Obama administration. And just a reminder, we are now just over 1 month away from America's election day. Is it possible that a regional war in the Middle East may end up being the October surprise in this year's presidential election?